All right. So we will get started. Just as a heads up to everyone, I am going to record this session so that people can check it out if they didn't get a chance to join today. For starters, I wanted to remind you that I posted a link in the chat to our resource hosted in Canvas. Now, you don't need to log in or anything to access this stuff, but I'll share my screen and kind of walk you through what this is. So basically, this Canvas course is where I've hosted all of the materials. So you'll see a session description here, little about me, and then the two resources that I'm using today. So there is a NITA presentation slide deck. It's called the NITA presentation because that was the last place that I presented this, and I just haven't renamed it yet. And then accessible digital design guidelines. And I will be leaving this open so that you will always have access to this. So if you want to bookmark this link or something, you can always hop back in and check out these resources after the session. But for now, what we're going to do is get started with the PowerPoint or slide deck, as the fancy people call it these days. Okay, so for starters, my name is Tyler Shaban, and this is the uh, accessibility in digital content presentation. So this is all about accessibility in digital content that you can create and send to your students. So it could be a Canvas page, could be a Word document, a PDF, a PowerPoint, anything digital. There's some guidelines for making sure that those are as accessible as possible to all students. I'm Tyler Shaban. I'm the secondary instructional technology trainer for Omaha Public Schools. And I started my career with OPS. I was a seventh grade science teacher at Nathan Hale Middle School. I'm actually repping the polo today. So I was a middle school teacher. And then eventually I got a master's in instructional design and technology. And I went to Creighton University, where I worked with their education department as an instructional designer. And one of my jobs was to help make sure, as I was designing courses, that they were as accessible as possible to all students, because there were legal requirements at the university level. And so that kind of started my journey into exploring how I can make things as accessible as possible to all people. And that's what led to this presentation. All right, next one. So, the outline of what we're going to be talking about today is why worry about accessibility? Why is it important? What should I look for when I assess digital content for accessibility? So, we'll go over and even practice going through some materials and seeing if we can identify ways to make it more accessible. And then, how can I make my digital content more accessible? So, what are some tips and tricks and tools and things that I can use if I really want to start working on this? So, a few disclaimers before I get started. There's a little bit of legal stuff in here. I don't really focus on that much with a K-12 audience. And the main reason for that is at the university level, you can be sued and stuff if you don't provide adequate accommodations. And I don't know if you can be sued or not in K-12, but I mean, really the reason that we all are here and all want to focus on accessibility with our content is just so our students can all access it equally. So, the other thing is, and this is hard for me to admit, and unfortunately this will be on recording, but I am not perfect despite what most people who know me think. So people look at me and they're like, "Oh, look at that guy. He's just, a genius and all that stuff and super humble." Well, unfortunately, I don't actually know everything, and most times that I present these presentations, I have somebody who will, point out something that I can add to the presentation or whatever. So it's always an evolving process of learning new methods and new strategies. And that's why I've continued to do this presentation a few times. And then finally, accessibility guidelines do get edited from time to time, and I am always learning. So the guidelines, they can change, basically. So to get started, since we're talking about accessibility, I want you to think to yourself, can you think of a time where you were not accommodated? What happened? So you don't have to have, some sort of disability or anything like that to require accommodations from time to time. Sometimes accommodations are built into our lives, you know, every day. So think of a time where maybe you were not accommodated properly. And so, what I'm going to have you do, if you're comfortable with doing it, I believe it's anonymous, but we have a Padlet where you can post some answers that we can discuss. So, if you go to the Canvas course, again, I did that kind of quick here. Let me go to Student View. It's the Accommodation Experiences Padlet, so I'll click here. I'll also share a link to this page in the chat, make sure everybody can access it. So there's the Accommodation Experiences Padlet, and it said, can you think of a time where you were not accommodated? What happened? And for mine, I'll just do an example. I'm going to put kindergarten class. Early in my career, I started off as a sub and I was desperate for money, so I took a week-long job in a kindergarten classroom. It was the worst decision I ever made. No offense to kindergarten teachers. It's just not my style. So the problem was for me was none of the furniture was big enough. The tables barely reached my knees. The chairs I couldn't really sit in. It was terrible. So definitely that was an accommodation need that I needed when I was subbing a kindergarten class. So what I want you to do is I want you to hop into the Padlet here and provide some examples that we can discuss of times where maybe you weren't accommodated, or maybe not even specifically you, just things you can think of where accommodations did not occur. And I'm going to set a timer for, let's give it 2 minutes or 1 minute. We'll do 1 minute. That'll be so timer's going. Feel free to hop in the Padlet. And time. Okay. So let's hop in here and see what we got. Volleyball, couldn't afford knee pads. That's a huge one. Sometimes you need financial accommodations and things like that. Ordering out, places do not offer gluten-free options. Yes, I can't even imagine having to deal with that. I have a buddy that ended up finding out he had a gluten intolerance and he struggles with that. Airline seats, way too little space between rows for tall people. Yes, I'm not even like I'm above average height, maybe a little over 6 feet, and I definitely struggle on planes. I would drive everywhere if I could. Think time to think. Time to think to be sure everyone can contribute. Yep. So thinking time. Restaurants, lighting is too dim and the font too fancy for my aging eyes. I'm not even that old and I have that experience. It's been a long time since I've been to like a nicer restaurant with dim lighting, but back in the day, definitely. Doors not easily opened or steps not allowing all people to get where they want to go. Absolutely. That is definitely for sure. I became a stroller user, not for me, for my kid, a year ago or so, and I've definitely noticed from time to time that it's kind of annoying having to like seek out elevators in stores that you didn't even previously know had an elevator, just because you can't put a stroller on a escalator. So I am told. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff here. We could go on and on and on. Work snacks, always sweets, but some can't have sweets. Yes, that is huge. Like donuts and things like that everybody always brings in. It'd be nice to have some variety. So yeah, there's accommodations are all around us. Accessibility needs are all around us. And the idea is to make sure we leave out nobody really. All right, so let's hop back into this PowerPoint here from current slide. So why accessibility? Well, the big thing is all students can benefit from making a course accessible, and not even a course, just like materials you use in class. So throughout this, I might have language referring to courses and stuff like that. It's just because I present this to multiple audiences, but really the whole idea is digital content, PowerPoints, uh, PDFs, Word documents, Padlets, even, any kind of digital resource. So, but the thing is by making it as accessible as possible to everybody, it actually benefits everybody. So, for example, I don't have a visual impairment, but I like captions. I turn captions on pretty much everything. And that's just my personal preference. And so it's nice having those captions, even though I don't necessarily need them. Same thing with we mentioned the options for work snacks because it always seems to be like donuts and cake and things like that. It would benefit everybody, not just people that can't have sugar, to have multiple options. So it's just overall, it's a win-win situation when you work on accessibility when creating your stuff for class. And then also there's the federal law component. It's an old stat, but in 2012, 11% of undergraduates surveyed by the U.S. Department of Education reported having a disability. I can guarantee you that number's higher now. And it's not because all of a sudden people have more disabilities, it's because people are actually starting to report and seek out accommodations that they need. Whereas that might have been an uncomfortable thing to do, a decade prior. Nowadays, society's come a long way and trying to accommodate people. And so we just have more people comfortable, I believe, with, making it known that they need assistance or not even assistance, just an accommodation to level the playing field. Um, there are some accessibility laws. I'm not going to go through these because it's boring, and you will have access to this PowerPoint if you want to read about these. But long story short, there are protections for people to make sure that they're properly accommodated in education. Before we go forward, I did want to discuss some terms that I've already kind of been using, but the first term is accessible. It just means that a person with a disability, or really anyone, is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information and engage in the same interactions and enjoy the same services as anyone else. So basically making things not necessarily equal, but equally effective. So, there might be certain accommodation needs, like when you have to read a test out loud to a student. It's equally effective, but there are students that are still not going to have that accommodation. So that's kind of that idea. So accessible just means everybody is able to have the same opportunities and acquire the same information, regardless of any sort of disabilities or anything of that nature. An accommodation is simply an auxiliary aid or service. So, in other words, it's making a change or adding something to something in order to accommodate people that might need it. And then, of course, we've got universal design for learning, a research-based set of principles to guide the design of learning environments that are accessible and effective for all. I like UDL. I'm sure many of you have had some experience with it at least. But I like UDL because it really focuses on keeping accessibility in mind when you're creating stuff. So when you're building a course or when you're building a resource for your students in class, just having it at the forefront of your mind as you're building, I really want to focus on making sure that this is going to be as accessible to my students as it possibly can be. And so that's kind of why I like that. So while I was at Creighton University, I kind of mentioned this before, and I know I refer to that, but that's because it's my relevant work experience regarding this topic. But when I was at Creighton University, we would evaluate courses for accessibility, and what we would look for was using the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are these 4 items right here. So, is the content perceivable? So information and user interface components must be presentable to users in a way that they can perceive. Is it operable? So does it work? Or they're going to be clicking around a bunch of broken links or something like that. Understandable. That's a huge one. I don't know how many people here have taken, like, say, an online class or something, and you couldn't figure out what was going on half the time because the instructions weren't super clear or something like that. That's what that one is about. So making sure that what you're presenting to students is understandable to them. And then, of course, robust. Robust enough that it can be used by a wide array of students, even if they have assistive technologies. So, one assistive technology I mention a lot is screen readers, and that's because I encountered those a lot. A screen reader is basically just a device that, or a program that will read a page out to students with visual impairments, or maybe you know, a variety of other reasons, but visual impairment being the most common one. But it reads the page out to them. We want to make sure that our students that are reading it themselves or our students that are using assistive technology can both access the page. And we'll go over how to do all this here in a little bit. Okay, so now it's time for a little pre-test. So we haven't actually gone over many accommodations yet, uh, or strategies for making things accessible. So what I've done is I've created Frankenstein's monster of a course page. So we'll back out of this, and that's going to be located here in the Canvas course, and I'll also post a link to it. But it's the example of a non-accessible page, beginner level. So I created this page to be pretty blatantly not accessible. I took all the worst things I've ever seen and compiled it onto one page. I also promised none of these links will give you a virus. Had some people concerned about that before because some of the websites seem a little shady. However, what I'm going to have you do is scroll through this, and you could just post it in the chat as you go, but identify ways that this page is either non-accessible or ways that you can make it more accessible. And then you can post those ideas in the chat. So for an example, maybe I could say, whatever that is, we got to fix that because it's just a broken file link on top of the page. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do this. And at the end of the 3 minutes, we will go through what's been posted in the chat for ways that we can fix this. So I've got that going. I'm going to go on mute for the 3 minutes. Okay, so that was our timer. Let's head on over to the page. Okay, so I was kind of keeping up with the chat as y'all were going. And yes, many of you identified some of the major issues with this page. So, for example, we've got multiple sizes of text, multiple colors. Some of the color contrast is pretty bad. It's hard to read what's actually going on with it. Navigating the page is difficult because there's lots of different directions. I like how someone mentioned the buzzwords. Yeah, there's just a lot going on here, and it's hard to tell what's really happening with this. So, no ability to translate. That's correct. On this one, there really is not a way to do that. There might be, so interesting side note on the iPad, students can highlight text and hit a translate button. I'd be curious to see how that would work in Canvas. I guess I'm curious on that. But at any rate, yeah, there's more issues than you can count. I've never in real life seen a page this bad. This is like the conglomeration of my nightmares. So there's a lot going on here. More color contrast issues. I like how someone pointed out that there was inconsistent formatting because that's very important as well. So like, we've got stars up here that don't actually even look like they're really indented, and then one random dot here. So that can really throw off something like a screen reader. So imagine being a student trying to use an assistive technology, for example. It's bad enough for somebody that doesn't have a visual impairment to navigate this page, but if you do have a visual impairment and you're using the immersive reader up here, or you've got some sort of reading out loud tool, this is going to be a mess because it also tries to describe what's posted, and there's broken links, lots of this. Oh, there's a lot going on. I'm glad that this flashing GIF is broke because that was kind of annoying. But if I hit the next on this page here, I actually ran this page through a screen reader, and this was the text that it comes up with. So imagine being a student with a visual impairment and you're relying on this to access the information on the page. Yikes. And, because of the poor formatting and everything, it just, groups everything together down here. There's no proper headings. So everything's just combined together in one giant, big, long paragraph. And I mean, I think it's safe to say that this page is completely inaccessible to somebody using a tool like that. So, and they get good at using these too. So it's a lot. All right. So now that we did that, I was glad to see a lot of you identified some of the ones I would normally identify as well. So the pretest went well. What we're going to do now is actually go over what are these guidelines? What should I be looking for when I'm creating content online for my students? And so the first thing is in the resources area, we have this accessible digital design guidelines document. And I'm going to copy and paste this link in the chat just to help you out. But this document is one that I created. It has some resources that you can use for like different websites. But the main thing we're going to be focusing on right now is the second page, which is the Digital Content Accessibility Guidelines Quick Reference. So this breaks down some main content areas, tells you what you can look for, what are those guidelines, and then also the benefits to it. So let me hop back into my PowerPoint and we can start going through some of those. All right, so the first one that we're talking about is audio and video. So providing captions or transcripts for videos. I send videos to teachers a lot, especially if I don't want to have to make one. I'll find one online to send to them, and I always try to make sure that mine contain captions. Now, this second thing, YouTube auto captions are not good enough. What that means is, legally speaking, if someone is required to have captions, the auto-generated ones on YouTube don't meet the accuracy threshold, which I think is like 95% or something like that, in order to count. In our case, though, I mean, YouTube auto captions are better than nothing. So, you know, so audio video captions are good, transcripts are good. Font styles. I saw someone mention this in the chat during the last one. So use easy to read fonts and good font size. So having consistent font size is also important because you've got all those different font sizes and it can throw people off. Some good fonts to use are like Calibri and Arial. So Arial, not sure. But Arial is what I'm using in this PowerPoint right now for the main text. And those are good because they're just a little easier on the eyes in terms of reading. And then some bad examples of fonts are like Comic Sans. Please don't make Comic Sans. I know it looks cutesy, but it hurts my eyes to read it. And then there's this Ravy thing, and then this one, and many more. I once had a professor reach out to me and say, "Hey, my students are reporting that they're having a hard time reading my content that I'm posting, and I don't understand why." And so it was a history teacher, and I went online to check it out, and sure enough, the entire document was in this font right here, so that it looked old world, and it looked really cool. Like, it was a very nicely themed page, but the text was just difficult to read, so we did have to fix that. Yeah, so font style is important. There's color. Color is a huge one. Visual impairments, such as having a hard time seeing or color blindness. Color can really be a huge game changer in a course. So having good color contrast, like for example, in this chart here, we have some examples of good contrasting colors, and then we have examples of some bad contrasting colors. And we did have some pretty badly contrasted color on that first example page. So, just making sure that it's in there. But, even though this yellow here is a good contrast with the blue, we probably wouldn't want to have an entire yellow page with this blue font. So that could be a little hard on the eyes as well. But contrast is important. And that sheet that I gave you access to, there is a website that allows you to test for color contrasting if you're interested in that. And then, like over here, there's examples of what um, being colorblind can be like. And then the second point on here is color should not convey meaning. What that means is, like, if you have something really important, I should change the wording to just color should not be used to convey meaning. Because what that actually means is, like, if something's important on a page or you want to highlight something, and a lot of people will just like make it red or whatever, or just a different color so it stands out. That's fine, but you'll want to combine that with something else, just in case somebody has a visual impairment that would prevent them from being able to recognize that that color's changed. So usually what I suggest, the easiest thing to do is bold it. So if you're going to have a sentence that is red because it's super important, or whatever color you choose, also bold it. And then that way, if somebody's using a transcriber or something like that, it will indicate that that text is bolded, and it will tell the student that that's important. And then also it just makes it easier to see. It'll stand out even if you're colorblind. So color should, I'll have to change that sentence. Color should not not only color should convey meaning. Combine bolding with it. That's probably the easiest thing. Now that I've gone through a few of these, are there any questions so far? You can either unmute or post in the chat. Okay. Another important one then is section headings. So we noticed that we had that big paragraph of text from the screen reader when the headings weren't used properly. Well, headings help break up that text, and a lot of programs have built-in heading levels. So like Word, I know, has built-in headings. Canvas has built-in headings. I'm pretty sure Nearpod has built-in headings. Anytime you go to edit a page and you see that they have heading levels listed, it's kind of important to go in order. And that way it can help organize the page, make it not seem so confusing, and then also accessible for accessibility tools and things like that. Image alt text. This is a big one that a lot of people miss, and I miss it all the time too. It's actually one of my goals as I'm trying to get better at providing alt text for my images when I use them. But basically what alt text is text that accompanies a picture that you might put on something, and it's usually got to be less than 150 words, and it's basically just a description of what that image is or what it's saying. And it's really only for instructional images, so like images that enhance the instruction of whatever it is that you're using. If it's just for decoration, you really don't need alt text because it's not important. So like if you have a picture of a sun with sunglasses on in the corner of your paper to make it look flashy, you probably don't need alt text for that, because the student, basically the rule of thumb is if the student's not missing instruction by not seeing that image, then you probably don't need an alt text. But if you do, you can either put the text below the image, or in some programs, when you add a photo, it will ask you to provide alt text. So like here's a screenshot from Canvas of them asking to provide alt text. But in addition to that, I know Nearpod does that, and Canva as well. When you add an image, it'll ask you to alt text it. So, and in that case, the alt text actually sits in the background. It doesn't put text right below it. So, but yeah, just providing context for what the image is if it's important for instruction. Link text. This is a huge one. I see this one all the time, but avoid vague or repetitive link text such as click here. The whole idea, I had someone in another session of this training say that the course that I was using or the page that we already viewed had some dodgy links on it. They didn't know if they wanted to click on those links because they had no idea where it was going to take them. And that's kind of important. So, avoiding the vague and repetitive link text like click here, and then also just like, you know, if people like, let's say I copied this and I just left it the way it was. A lot of people will do that. In fact, I think it was like that on the trainings catalog for today for some of them, but it's fine because not everybody knows about this. But let's say that I copied this entire link right here and I just pasted it on a document as it was. If a student is using an assistive reader or something's reading the page to them, it's going to read this entire link out letter by letter. And it's going to be take forever and kind of be a waste of time. So by shortening links, you're making it more easily accessible to have those links. And then also using language that makes sense out of context. So an example I put here, and I've linked this, it says, the CNN homepage features numerous online news articles. If I click on this link, I know exactly where it's going to go. It's going to the CNN homepage. So just it describes it. And then also I like to put if it's a document, I like to put the document type behind it. So like if we look at the last link I shared, I kept the .docx in there so people would know, hey, that's a Word document, and then it's on SharePoint. So, and it's really cool now because Microsoft products will shorten those links for you. So, the links I've been posting in the chat today, I didn't actually do anything to them. I just copied it from the top, and when I pasted it, it fixes it automatically and makes it shorter, which I think is really cool. Table captions and column headings as teachers, you all know, kind of probably already know the rules of tables, but basically just having a heading. And then also not using a table just for decorative purposes. So like sometimes people will put images in a table just so that they can get it arranged on the page how they want it. It's just sticking to using tables as they're intended, which is to display data or information as a table does. Another one is document types. So all documents should be accessible, and there's a very easy way to tell if a document is accessible. And the way to tell is if you can highlight the text or not. So let me back out of that. A PowerPoint's a type of document. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click it here, and I'm going to see, can I highlight this text? Yes, I can. I can highlight it. I can highlight this. Yep, all this is accessible. And what that means is if a student is using a screen reader, or if they wanted the page to be read back to them, the technology would be able to do that because these are words that you can highlight. Whereas this image over here, this is just a scanned copy of a book. If I click on it, I can't actually highlight the text. All I can do is move around the image. And the reason being is that this is just a picture. So there's not actual words that a screen reader can pick up. So if a student has a visual impairment and they're using technology to read back to them, and they won't be able to read this. So it's just an image. I can't highlight the text. So it's just going to say that it's an image of a book or something like that and move on. So they'll miss out on all this text in here. So that's kind of the key. If you can highlight the text, and this works on everything. Works on the internet, works on Word, works on PowerPoint, works on Canvas, works on Nearpod. As long as you can highlight the text, you know that it's accessible. But if you can't highlight the text like on this image here, I'm clicking right now vigorously trying to highlight it, it doesn't work, then I know that that's not accessible. So hopefully that assists. All right, so those are my main guidelines that I wanted to cover today. Are there any questions about any of these guidelines before we go on to our final exam? Okay. Oh, why can't you use tables? So you can use tables, but just as like a normal table. Like what I'm talking about is like when people try to like organize pictures on a page because it's not cooperating, and so they'll put it in a table to like spread it out. But regular data tables are just fine.
But what's the issue with it if you do that? Like, what is it what's the problem that it causes for
It
accessibility?
makes everything inside of it inaccessible to assistive technology. Like, it's just kinda something to avoid, like, on the back end as something's reading a page to you, because if it encounters a table that doesn't have data in it, it's just like it, like, reads it as, like, a random grouping of pictures, basically.
Gotcha, but you could do text in a table for
Yeah, like
organizing text. Okay,
yeah, like,
I see.
regular what you would normally use a table for is just fine. It's just when people try to use tables for, like, special design purposes because something's not working.
Perfect. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Okay. So now it's time for the final exam. And I'm a huge like 80s B horror movie fan, and I couldn't resist using this image of the movie Final Exam, which is just awful, but it's funny. Uh what we're going to do is we're going to do the same activity that we did at the beginning, except now that you know more about what you're looking for, we're going to try it with a little bit harder of a page. So, let me hop in here. And this is the advanced level non-accessible page. So this is probably more accurate of what you would see in real life. Because obviously nobody's going to actually create a page like our first one and think it's okay. But this one actually seems pretty legit. So, well, what I want you to do, I'm going to give you 3 minutes. The same thing as before. You can post in the chat what you're seeing. What are some ways that we could make this particular page more accessible? So you can scroll through it, click on the links, check it out, say, hey, how can I make this more accessible? I will start the timer for 3 minutes. All right, here we go. All right, that is the timer. So I've been kind of checking the chat here, and I've seen a lot of people point out some good stuff. So, uh, yeah, one person mentioned this red text right here. Again, it's fine to do this, but well, it's fine to do this. It's fine to use color, I guess I should say. But bolding it also will make it much more accessible to students. So we could also bold it. There is some links down here that were not working that I saw somebody mention. A few people mentioned the color contrast. There are definitely some color contrast issues on here. I can tell right away that this green probably is not good. I saw someone mention that we need more concise language, which is absolutely true. So maybe these instructions could use a little bit of work. There's the dreaded click here link. What will happen if I click there? Nobody knows because it's not labeled. So we've got that. I don't believe the headings are correct. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes, but this looks smaller than this. So I would probably check that as well. So there's some heading issues. One type of font and color. Yeah, I would agree with that. I suppose unless you have like a really specific reason that you need to use multiple colors, like maybe to like point out different types of things, but even then you should still bold it just so it stands out. Yeah, you guys got a lot of them on here. Let me. Oh, the hyperlink is long. Where's that? Yep, right here. There's another hyperlink. I almost missed that one. So yeah, this would be read out to a student. Not a fun time. And yeah, well, you guys nailed a lot of this stuff. So very awesome. Glad to see it. Okay. Now, I did want to show you one. This is a Canvas specific thing, but it's worth noting for those of you that do use Canvas. If you're in secondary, you do have access to it. Elementary, unfortunately, you do not, but One tool in Canvas, particularly, that makes it a lot easier to identify some basic accessibility issues is if you go to edit a page, there is an accessibility checker built into each page. So this little guy right here is my accessibility checker. Let me refresh this and see if it'll light up. Sometimes it lists a number of the accessibility issues, sometimes it doesn't. But if I just click on it, what it'll do is it'll bring up some accessibility issues that it identifies. Now, it doesn't catch everything, but it's better than nothing. So what I can do now is it's telling me, oh, that red's not dark enough. So I can drag this over till it says it is, and then I'll hit apply. It fixes it. I was correct. It did have the headings messed up. So it's asking, do we want to fix the headings? So yep, fix heading hierarchy and then apply. Same thing with color. More color. It catches a lot of color and heading issues, which sometimes are the hardest to identify. Okay, so I've got that pretty good. Didn't touch the links or anything. And of course, there's no way it can scan for, like, how are the instructions? Are they clear? Things like that. But it's a good start. So I always like to point it out. Okay, so hopping back in here. Some other tools that are also listed on your sheet that you got are like the contrast checker. So it will check, and you can use those websites to check for contrast. There's some tools on accessibility in different LMSs. There's a video about universal design for learning, which really, like I said, I like it because it really focuses on making things accessible, keeping accessibility at the forefront of your mind when building things. And then semantic structure of headers and links. So this talks about some of the reasons for proper headers and links and gives some more tips and strategies like that. Okay, so key takeaways. Understanding the importance of providing accommodations to make digital content accessible. So we know it's important, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by this either, because like I said, I've been delved into this world of digital accessibility for years now, probably 5 or 6 years, I want to say, and even I'm still learning stuff. So you don't need to tackle it all at once. It's going to be almost impossible to make something 100% accessible all the time. There's always situations that can come up. But the idea is just to, keep it at the forefront of your mind as you're making things for your students. Some of these guidelines and strategies so that they can be as accessible as possible for what you're capable of doing. And again, even I'm still learning how to do this stuff. I am sure there's probably some sort of accessibility issue somewhere in this PowerPoint, and I tried really hard to eliminate all of them because it'd be really ironic having a glaring error of accessibility on a PowerPoint about accessibility. So yeah, just understanding the importance of providing those accommodations, and then understanding also that, you don't have to be perfect. Just work towards it, keep it at the forefront of your mind, maybe refer to that guide. Utilizing universal design for learning, I kind of just covered that one to comply with it. So keeping it at the forefront. And then application of Canvas tools and freely available online resources can aid in the implementation of UDL into online course materials or just digital course materials. So that's our takeaways. And now we have time for some final questions.